All right. I felt like I had just shot a whole video, and sometimes the way a video is, your first cut doesn't really work the way you expect. The audio is bad. The clipping between desktop and camera mode is not so good. So anyway, I haven't filmed in a while, and I felt like filming kind of just out of boredom. And sometimes when you're writing heavy technical code, there's not a lot of room for error. And so it's nice to just like celebrate what gains that you have done. And in this particular case, I felt like sharing. I have kind of the ask of I'm actually probably ready for beta testers, um, and so felt like just demoing code today, honestly, and maybe just showing kind of what the current offering looks like. Um, so currently, I've been building for a while, for probably the last 3 years, just a lot of my own infrastructure in this space that's basically called platform as a service, which really is just synonymous with vertical integration in the technology, software application code delivery space. What does that mean? That just means that effectively, like, we've arrived at this very complex supply chain in a market where increasingly the suppliers in that supply chain, they most suppliers in tech will give you a freemium option in order to bring down, they try to recognize and honor the adoption cost that teams must go through. And they do so by giving you a free tier. So an example of this would be somehow, I got Amazon will give you startup credits if you believably have a startup. And I think it's like $5,000 over a 2-year period. And their hope and the way that they get you is that they hope that you make use of their services to such an extent that by the time your free period expires, 2 years or 5,000, whichever comes first, that now in my case I'm hit with I think like a $500 a month bill. So that's a crazy amount of money. But if you combine that, basically, like, you might have at least 5 to 10 different vendors in a true environment, or a true like tech stack, and they're all trying to get theirs, in terms of like your money. That's going to be costly. And so a platform as a service is basically a play where you consolidate and provide, hopefully, one flat fee. And so it's kind of like a pricing play. So that's kind of what I've been working on, and I kind of have gotten to this point where, again, like I said, I'm kind of just bored from having developed for a little bit. I made this pricing page, kind of just to tell people like what I'm actually doing. But the truth is that I just don't know if this is the right way to go to market, but it gives people a bit of a clear idea, like a starting point at least. I have an old docs page which shows just docs for the tech, but that's kind of just sitting on an old Mirror website before I happen to kind of revamp the Vue.js router. Um, so that's why it's not currently integrated on this kind of newer, uh, tech. But basically, the beta program would live as like a VPS environment in a cloud development environment, and that is something that is most similar to like a GitHub code spaces. And importantly, it just would feature this mono repository tool. And so mono repository, so for most tech organizations out there right now, they're either working in like a serverless environment, they could be working in a Kubernetes style environment. And these are, again, going back to that platform as a service, they're really complicated spaces. So I'm on an account in the healthcare space right now, and they're going to wind up in a Kubernetes cloud, but they have to outsource, because in other words, in order to make Kubernetes productionized and secure, they're going to outsource that to a firm that specializes in just that, compliant Kubernetes clouds. So, this stuff is not simple, and yeah, it's basically like it's the kind of thing like that justifies this like platform as a service or vertical integration. But I was also attempting to sort of explain that, when it comes to this mono repository stuff, um, this kind of lives at a layer that is like maybe closer to the development environment a um, than a network-based solution like with Kubernetes, which is going to manage, usually like a gateway talks to many Docker containers, so in like a Docker Compose style setup, um, or in like a serverless environment, you would have, in fact, it's called an API gateway, would be your like managed service. So a monorepository instead, and this is like where I've spent countless hours of time and cost. I have a patent on this tech, um, and I don't have it here, but one of the important things is that it runs on CommonJS modules, which is kind of unique in the sense that a lot of the stuff in our JavaScript tooling these days is running off of ESM or using transpilers in some shape or fashion, which can get complicated, but also like as I just for fun, I just wanted to just dive into today that a lot of the way that I wind up um, achieving kind of utility across a monorepo is through a technique that is completely different in terms of a paradigm when compared to something like doing like a dependency graph. What would be in a technical term would be called an AST. So like Webpack uses ASTs to evaluate like an entry point into your code base, and then they want to evaluate every dependency of every dependency. So this tool that I've arrived at building effectively achieves something very similar, um, but because it's done in CommonJS, I'm hopeful that like there's definitely ways to modernize it. Modern Node has and like I'm hugely thankful to the developer that did this. There is a flag I think in Node version 22 that will interoperate between CommonJS and ESM. So that's one part of modernization. Another part is I just hope that this tool, because it's in CommonJS, is appealing to the type of developer, just like many developers these days will develop inside of Vue.js because they don't want to deal with all this like tooling. I mean, they still wind up with Vite and like these .vue files, which I've figured out a way around. This is all in Vue.js, by the way, in terms of front end stuff. But yeah, developers do that because they don't want to deal with all of this complicated and costly tooling. They just want to build stuff. Anyway, on top of that, I kind of deliver, this stuff like managed DNS certificates. This is all kind of stuff you'd more standard see in like Kubernetes, doing, network security and all that. But today, I thought we'd focus more on all these microhost features, more just for fun. And the other thing is, again, I'm kind of sincerely looking for beta testers. If you happen to know anyone um, in the JavaScript space that wants to get into the ground floor, I've thought about releasing this software as like open source. The microhost tool would be suitable for that, where you just run it inside a local Docker container, and if you wanted to network it out to the internet, that's the middle pay tier that I have right here. Just bring your own cloud, so you could run everything in like a local Docker container and then have certificates and effectively dynamic DNS that would route to it. But the truth is that like I've had so much time thinking about this because I don't know that really that's the right strategy to go to market. I mean, even with a patent, we already know that Next.js is doing these like file-based API routes. So it's not really a big jump, and they probably could do it without per se infringing on the patent that I have to do so in like a monorepository style environment. Um, so like I've thought long and hard about like because I think when you invest so much of your own time and capital into building something like this, you're looking for like your quickest possible exponential gain. So at this point, like that's why I'm like making a video, is because I'm like I have sweat out, all or burned all of the cash that I have. I'm back to trading my time for money, and that means that I can't really go back to the drawing board, and I have to be more strategic about how I do deep work. Of course, there's things like with building something at this complexity where you can't do a day job and this level of complexity. I think I've gotten the hardest stuff out of the way, but it's like you search for those little exponential things. And in this case, I think bringing in beta testers is necessary, because when you have so much surface area of tech, as I do, you simply put you have to bring other people in. You have to start creating value for other people. So again, that's kind of why I'm making this video today. It's kind of like I've been running for a minute without like a lot of reward back to. I'm sure none of you, if you're still watching this and you're non-technical, God bless you. But for anybody who's not technical, of course, they wouldn't understand like how far down your dopamine sinks when building technical systems. You don't come up for air with reward. So I have this pricing page done, which I hope kind of elucidates what the heck I'm doing. I have a docs page, as I said, that it's sitting on some old CloudFront mirror, but this was before I went and did a refactor on the Vue.js router. So I have all of like the docs and things that I gotta pull over. These are, of course, are just like, this is the JS doc that got printed out. But I have like the equivalent of like guides and diagrams, and all that stuff. Um, but yeah, I'm looking for beta testers. If you know anyone, or if you want to get in at the ground floor, I'm kind of thinking that instead of doing um, like a wide popular release for this thing, that instead, like, what I think I want to do is I want to build together a group of indie devs that want to basically reach financial freedom together. So using these tools, so I like the strategy of like, in tech it can be this, like, you can win by way of politic, where you've amassed like the biggest pile, a bag of money, and now you have the VC money and some investor who doesn't know what they're doing. They think they do, but maybe they really don't in terms of tech, has given you the bag of money, and now because you have the bag of money, the developers come to work for you. That's like the political way of winning. I like the way of winning where you actually produce a technical advantage, which is incredibly hard to do. Of course, different conversation of whether or not that requires cash. But there are evidences of, like, if you look at levels.io, or Peter Levels would be the most notable example, where there are ways that you can probably win while being just a single indie developer. So I think I might like to go to market, even though I have this pricing page done. I might still prefer to go to market, in such a way where, yeah, maybe like the better thing to do is just to assemble like a team of developers that build in these tools. We're going to build some micro SaaS stuff together that earns enough revenue to create freedom for us. And anyway, before we just jump into all this code demo stuff, which that's what I wanted to do today. Just worth covering or mentioning. The other thing that this should ship with out of the box is, authentication. So pretty standard when you look at like Supabase, that it has all this stuff. But what's crazy is, like, as soon as you go and you evaluate some of these other, whether it's Auth0 or this is Super Tokens, you evaluate some of these pricing models. They're so complicated, and they're so like, they're so, I guess I would say, like, they're so opaque in terms of, like, they're not transparent in terms of what it costs and what you get in exchange. Like this I think will even say you have a self-hosted model, but yeah, as soon as you go on multi-factor auth, the pricing jumps to 100 a month, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't even, like, what, a dashboard user, that's free. Multi-tenancy. I just, I personally can't get a really good gist of how costing. Maybe that's the same minimum billing of 100 a month is where that comes from. But yeah, of course, as soon as you go to like looking at Auth0 and what Auth0's cost structure is, it's scary, because it jumps to like 500 a month as soon as you start paying. So that again is just kind of justifying this platform as a service stuff. But yeah, I'll just pause it there, and I just want to dive into just code tech demo stuff today. All right, so let's dive in. So first of all, like, what the heck is a cloud development environment? So I'd mentioned like Peter Levels as an example, and it was him. I interacted with him on one of his communities, and he's the one that told me he develops directly in his production box, which is like crazy in terms of like typical enterprise organizations. But what this means is that, or sorry, what it translates to in this case, with whether it's GitHub Codespaces or Cloud9, and I'm not even going to mention like the big tech company that I worked at, that everyone is always on a cloud IDE. Um, but it's not a cheap solution. I have found that generally it requires about 6 to 10 gigabytes of memory, maybe on the lower end 4 to 8, just to run one of these. But yeah, so this in the bottom left, you see how it says SSH. So, and you can see down here, I'm obviously on a Windows box, but I'm connected to a Linux environment. This is on Hetzner. I'm kind of currently in migration away from being on AWS. And so, like, one of the first things that I'm going to refactor this system a little bit, but one of the first things that you would do in this system, let's say as a beta or VPS user, is you would set up, here I have a repository that it bangs through all of these JSON files, and it would attempt using your GitHub key, you'd come up with a personal access token, which I've gone to a length of making sure that storage of that. I don't use like AWS Vault, but I use GPG, which is at least it's some symmetric encryption locally. And then you do some user separation. But bottom line, you use a personal access token that's securely stored to try to clone all of these repositories into your file system. And then once you do that, and of course, if you want to like co-develop on your box with like other environments, here, well, I don't want to speak any further on that, but basically you can just set folders to be ignored so they don't get picked up by this monorepository tool. And so what happens is that once you begin to install these tools, once you begin to install these repositories, they're going to get picked up by the monorepository tool, such that I believe it's like, here, we can just, I think if I did this, micro list user packages. So this is a listing of all of the packages that are on my system. And as a for instance, if I was to just add another one, let's say probably even, I could even just go into what, SassWorks test, and then there's this micro init. So it's going to drop like a package JSON and all the other bootstrap type of files, right? So again, I could rerun that now to just list all of the packages on my system, and it's going to pick up, or it should have anyhow, should have picked up on test. Oh, we can always debug it and see what happened there. All the user packages. In All right, let me pause this. We'll figure this out. That was particularly weird. It turns out that I guess I probably have an ignore pattern somewhere. So if you name the folder test, it's not going to pick it up. But effectively, we should be able to run this micro list packages, and we should be able to see, this package come up. If we were to rename it to like test2, of course, and we like reran it, this would then, update it or reflect it. Now, the magic to the system comes into play in that, let's say if I dropped an API file in here, right? And now instead, we can just code up this function right now. I've been kind of in this mode, like I said, of productionizing, but also just like, sometimes you go through when you're developing tech, like you'll have these moments where you're gonna kind of take on like feedback of like what people and devs give you, and then you're gonna try to implement, like for instance here, we're just gonna implement like a new API right now. So this is what we're doing is we're working inside of like this is kind of a way that you can just write scripts in this system. Cross packages, I guess. Sure, get files, and then here we're going to define arg. We'll say name, path, type, string, description. Whatever. And now all files, args.path. And here, and I forget, like there's a way where you can basically say what. So we'll just interactively like code this right now. Why not? Here, so we're gonna start it out this way. This and then so now we're gonna do list files and then path API, and it's just gonna give us this like interesting. So we're in get files. For it could be, let's see, get all files for API. Doesn't seem right. Try get all files. Ends with. Let me pause again. All right. So I'm kind of as I mentioned, I'm still kind of amidst some developer experience refactors. I mean, this system has, I don't know, dozens of tests. I mean, more like in the hundreds of tests written against it. But the idea here is as simple as like um, that you basically just say like get all files and then given some path, and it's going to return. In this case, we did API. I mean, we could do it with like configs, for instance, and then we'll explore like the difference between the two. But these are basically just the package roots. So, again, if we went back to the top and what was it like get list packages, right? It's basically just running a search inside each one of these, and it's basically just trying to get or pull out the files. So here we're doing a config search. Um, you know, uh, Up here we were doing an API search, and of course because we had just dropped that file into that test, whatever it was, like a test package, it pulled that into the return result. We could just obviously make this as arbitrary as possible and call this like foobar, and now we just run a file query for foobar. But the most important part about this, we can also kind of do like, there's other modifications which we'll go ahead and just I'll just show like what that looks like right now. So if I wanted to return, for instance, let's go mess around with this file. And like I said, it's like this system, it's completely working and functional in the sense that like this has been stable since about 2019. So that's about 5 years. It's more just that calculus of like how do you release it in such a way where you get anything in return. And there's all kinds of like I talk all the time with the developer community. The guy that developed Brew, for instance, talks about how disgruntled he was because Apple profited a lot off of his tool, but then he got nothing in return. There's so many stories like this. So that's why I didn't really release. But here, I think we want this by package tool. All right, so here, so if we just add into our query here, we just say, I think by package is true. Now we're going to rerun it, right? Okay, so now this is going to give us a little bit of a cleaner output because it's going to tell us like in what package contains what. So here we could say, for instance, we could see a bit more cleanly like which packages contain the results of our file query. Um, and it just kind of goes on and on like this. The core, and again, like I have a patent on all of this, and what the core patent protects is this file system query. So, we're all kind of used to in mono repos that, you're able to, like, for instance, you're able to streamline an installation or version management across your system of packages. Um, and, and it turns out that basically when you implement these like mono repo tools, the gains that you get in exchange for the cost that you pay to implement them is not great. And a lot of that, like I did. Again, it's crazy in tech. You can labor over tech. So you have the two ways of making money, right? Actually do something, which we don't live in an economy that rewards people who do things. We live in an economy that reward people who play politics and assemble capital as a function of control. So I'm not even going to get into that in this video, but like what I'm sort of saying is that we've arrived at a series of tools that don't necessarily they introduce conflicting or misaligned technology. So the fact that you already operate with ASTs means that using this type of mono repo tool, I don't think it makes as much sense. But you can see here that like what I'm doing is I'm creating a semantically organized construction. The language in the patent is that of ambiguously known files. So we're able to do discovery of packages, but and that can be dynamic. In like Yarn workspaces, for instance, you might define like a glob pattern, whereas this, and mind you, like this could be a ton faster than it is. Like I do show benchmark times, like it loads in 384 milliseconds, and then it does this auto loading stuff, and so it's about a second, But this could be even faster. Once you start pumping more files to traverse through, it does get slower. You can control that by specifying ignore directories, but I mean, you could make this even faster. I don't really have worker threads going on here. But my point is that you don't really, like when you're using ASTs, you're at the point that you adopt a system like this, you at least now have two tools that do very similar things. And what I've learned, is that developers start to get very confused about when to use what tool, especially when they have very similar function. And so the AST as a tool, kind of pushes you into a certain direction. Um, so this kind of winds up being, you can think of it like a fork. I've just been building in JavaScript forever, and this does it just a completely different way. I don't really want to get into the demoing because I haven't on this system set up the gateways yet. As I said, I'm kind of stepping through everything again just to try to productionize. Um, but like you could imagine, for instance, let's see. I mean, I could. Um, yeah, I mean, if I went to go start up the gateway server, for instance, I could try that. Let's see. Let's go into. It's probably just micro G start. Obviously, you see that I'm running commands here. What is this saying? So I still haven't debugged all of this just yet. Saying server is not defined. It should be, but I don't know. Let's go check this out. Or it's just saying that toSlug is not a function, but it should be. What is it filled with? It's just saying it's false. Let's go check in node modules. So you see out here, it's like this icon means it's a symlink. It should just symlink in all of the local packages, notably this server package, which should then pull that in. how this winds up at false. So let's look at the code. And it just should be require. Here. So it's obviously hitting an error. Let's go debug. Of course. Alright, but oh, we need the error, most importantly. Cannot find module, but of course I think that we had proved out that here it's saying false. So the problem here is that the reason that on this video there's been so many errors is that I traditionally coded the system where you have to start in at least like an active package directory, and here I think it's like what's happening is I wanted the user to not have that requirement. I want you to just be able to use this tool from anywhere. So I'm kind of steadily trying, and this is, I think, going to improve the developer experience. So like I'm steadily adding better developer experience to account for this. An error occurred. File system. All right. Boom. Just like that. And that should get us past it. Yeah. So, let's see. I guess oddly though, that was micro G start. Let's kick out of this. So I still have some more, rebuilding of my system effort to go through, but what I most wanted to go in demo. So if I just jumped into here, gateway, right, and just ran a server in here. Here, what I don't like is that, so what it's doing, there's a couple things I got to do. Nice, it has banned IPs. Love that. It's loading all of like my AWS hosted zone domains. It's next reading all of the, let's see, I just don't want it to take over DNS for anything that it shouldn't. Mail, I mean, some of this stuff, man, I don't know. Hopefully, anyway, I have health checks and everything. We'll just mess with it. You got to make good content, which means risking breaking stuff. But yeah, here, so using the same file system query, what it's doing basically is it's similar to bundling. Like, again, if I went, I'd have to actually go to this tool here, and then, what was it? Let's change this from foobar to like API. We'd also need to say here that microhost share true, share folders, and then API. So we need to do that. So let's restart the server now, and let's add an API route. Let's just say exports, whoops, rec res next, res send foobar. Um, and so I don't know if it's going to pick up on that we just tried to share this particular service. So these are again things that I'm trying to handle within developer land of developer experience. So what we want to see is this route called A show up, and if it doesn't show up here, we'll just kick out of this, go up a level, up a level. Let's just try to run micro, see what happens. So I might need to run, let's go into my test. Let's try to run micro in here. Let's try to run micro install. Yeah, I've got a, so you see how down here it said sharing test2 in directory. So now if I go back to microcloud gateway, there's this idea that like if a package is within your package's directory structure, it will pick up on all of its routes. Here, it's like we are not in the same directory structure, so we have to rely on what's called package sharing. And now it's going to pick up on the route that we added, this a.js that's sitting in my test, right? And it's going to add that, yeah, at the bottom here, showing in Express.js, it's really important, like the priority of routes. And so it's going to add it to the bottom of the list. But yeah, we should be able to now, um, yeah, this is part of this tunneling tool in VS Code. Probably going to give us a certificate error, which we have to tell Chrome that we don't care. And then we could just hit that A endpoint and get foobar. We could change the result right here. It's I have to retouch like the file watchers, but yeah, see how now it just picked up on the route and it just sent it through. Um, and so probably like that's cool and whatever. It starts to get more exciting if like for instance, if I drop in like a components folder, I don't really want to demo this. I mean, I can, screw it, why not? Um, but let's see, gateway. Yeah, I don't even know if I don't even think I have the gateway set up in such a manner that, yeah, it's just not even going to have, I mean, here, look, I could go, yeah, I could probably do it that way. So here, if I just refresh, it's probably still listening for a connection. Is it? Should shut that thing down. Probably still has an open connection, but let me boot out that way. I learned never hit Control Z. I don't know what it is on Apple, but what I just did does not kill the process. It becomes a zombie process. I'm just hoping that it was already in process of terminating. Something was causing it to stay open. Usually it's like a request that hasn't timed out yet. And oftentimes in Google Chrome, it'll try to re-ping a website, um, and it kind of keeps the socket open. So if we go out of this and now we just go to, I think it was just my test, right? And we just run in here, and now we'll just like have this one called a.html. I'm just demoing right now like components. And try that. So let's open up DevTools. I'll sort of show what goes on here. So it's gonna compile this bundle. But what's interesting is I don't even think I have the Vue components. That's probably not going to work yet because I don't have the components installed on the system. Or I do. They are there. So that 100% should work. This actually even shows, let's see, view utilities. We can kind of inspect here. View component factory by name. So it does pick up on this A component. Then it really should just display it. So let's see. That all looks right enough. Components. Let's try components. I think it's just component though. Components. This is just like a route that I have within Vue that's supposed to toggle. Like, if you just added a new component to the system, and so this should be Vue utilities, right? So that exists. And if we went into that particular component, should be close to being in here. Utilities. Yep. And let's see if there's an error anywhere in here. I mean, this stuff doesn't really bother me that much, but maybe that's bothersome. So this is probably saying that it's like reliant on an authentication library, which I have not installed on this system yet. And because it's related to routing, it could be problematic. To view, and then it's looking for a .me. It's a .me? Okay. Boom. Booyakasha. And maybe that's what's going wrong. Cool. And again, like I said, I'm kind of just still getting this, productionized system back up. This is saying do not use built-in reserved HTML elements as a component ID. That's fair. So let's go back to this and let's call this like a test. All right. And so again, because this system is like it's just reliant on this, again, patented file system query. It's like it's not doing any Webpack recompile or any of this like crazy stuff. I mean, gosh, like if you look at this like turbo repo stuff these days, these are people who have assembled huge budgets to work around ASTs run across, a system of packages. And here, I mean, look, like, let's do like B test now, right? Let's just throw that in there. And then we'll add B test in here. And we're going to show that it's like scope styles. And this has nothing to do with like compiling JavaScript. Oh my gosh, who let those people into the community? This type of thing. And here we'll just do like, and we can just put some strong out here. They really are dynamic. and there's like, there's a whole set of wrappers that I built in Vue. One of the learning lessons from how I did all this is it's just like you really don't want to manage that much code. You really, like, the happy path in tech is manage as little as possible. Anyway, this is like running now to be like a 45-minute length video, so I'm gonna drop off. I will say once again, I'm looking for beta testers, people that want just free VPS. I think I'm looking for people particularly who want to develop micro SaaS products using a system like this that has, I basically want to be the cloud provider. I want to provide, it would be using, it's like basically like a wrapped version of Express.js. It's a wrapped version of Vue.js. It's going to be familiar enough for people that develop in Express and develop in Vue, and then it's using CommonJS modules. So really, like, my ideal beta tester is someone that likes developing in those tools, and then I'm going to be the provider of all things like deployment and orchestration and uptime and system security and database management. Um, and then I'm trying to think of what else. We go look at the stack actually. So I mean, this is the whole tech stack right here, pretty much. I pulled out at least most of what's being used, and really obviously like, how unique is it to use Axios for network requests? I mean, I was just going through the dependencies pretty much, and just enumerating them. So there's probably other dependencies, but this is this is just a bunch of them, in other words. So yeah, I mean, again, it's like my hope is to find some. I already have kind of like another developer who I work with who has access to this environment, so it's all pretty much there and ready to go. I'm happy to work with people to try to get this local cloud setup done. So you would just like run it in a Docker container. We're not going to Dockerize Alpine. I don't want to deal with that. We'll probably just Dockerize Ubuntu. This is all in a Ubuntu system. Um, but yeah, I mean, like, I'm happy to work with people in whatever capacity. I would love to just bring together a community of indie devs and then solve the hard technical problems and support, and even there's a few different micro SaaS tools that I either already have in progress or have a significant amount of assets toward. But yeah, the strategy here is like, why not now? It's a great time because a lot of devs have been laid off. A lot of people are disillusioned with the state of the world, especially like, we've all had colleagues that are kind of sleazy, liars, gamify for their own ends. We've had probably so many people have encountered various forms of betrayal. That could be like someone promised you shares, you didn't get shares. Someone's like, said your idea is really interesting, let's jump on a call, and then they wound up raising money on your idea. So like we've had enough of that. I think this is a good time. Like this is not a good time to release to open market and trust in like the goodness of people. Like I think on an individual like small scale level we have to trust for that. But I think that when it comes to like the community of the internet and the state of trust in the world and the state of trust on the internet, not the best time. So that's why again, like I'm appealing in my local community here, or local network, just because I have not yet gotten around. And like when you burn through all your cash and you no longer can full time your side hustle or ambition, it becomes a much longer cycle to go and generate some of the docs, or sorry, whether it's documentation or whether it's like a beta program marketing spread. I think I spent probably 2 weeks of my time just on that stupid pricing page. It's not stupid, it's important, but um, I'm sort of saying that sometimes maybe a video is the easiest path. And I think I just hadn't shot in a while. I just want to have fun, um, and just show people like what I've been up to with these systems. And they're getting much closer. The effort I went through in the last year was getting to like a proper, secure multi-user system. And like I said, I've been running a few like live websites on the server and setup for a while. I did not cover today anything to do with like process management, PM usage of PM2. Um, didn't really get into like uptime resilience or any of that stuff. And there's a ton of different parts to the system, but the core bread and butter that like a user would have access to is like that ability to run servers, ability to not think about DNS or certificates, ability to just freely create Vue.js components or routes or whatever, and do it in a multi-package system. So yeah, I don't know if you know anybody that wants to beta test. Again, it's basically like free VPS hosting. Please just reach out and let me know how you can think to get in contact with me, whether I post this on LinkedIn or um, yeah, I don't besides if I post this on LinkedIn, I don't have a great idea of how I want to get in touch with. Just contact me directly. It's mike@sassworks.io. That's probably best. Just email me, and then I will set you up. I'm only gonna do probably no more than 6 beta testers. So right now, like bringing on 2 people. Like I'm not looking for a huge number. So if you want to be part of this, or you know someone who would be good, um, you know, I don't care what level of seniority. I probably don't want someone who's junior level. probably in that mid-level. Usually I find like the best developer for this type of thing, like if you already have an operating Docker Compose file that does everything you want, you've already gone to that length to assemble your monolith, like you're probably a less good fit for this. If on the other hand, you really like CommonJS components, you love dead simple vanilla JavaScript, you love Vue.js, you love Express, and more than any of that, you just love building stuff. Like this could be a good fit. And I'd love to speak with yourself or anybody that you know that would be a good fit for this. And that's all I got. Bye. See you next time.